My name is Margot Calloway. I am 29 years old. And the last thing my mother ever called me in front of other people was a mistake. She said it in a ballroom with white columns and gold chandeliers. At my sister's wedding. While I stood there holding a glass of champagne I never asked for. "Why is the mistake here?" That was her opening line. After 8 years of silence, my sister turned from her photographer, saw my face, and smiled the way you smile at a stain on a rented tablecloth. "You weren't invited," she said. She was right. She just didn't know who had actually invited me. My family had 8 years to learn who I had become. And they spent every one of them pretending I no longer existed. But what the groom's mother said next didn't just end an evening. It ended a reputation 3 generations in the making. And I never once raised my voice. This story doesn't start in that ballroom. Though, it starts 11 years earlier. In a hallway with a wall of framed diplomas, and one frame left empty on purpose. If you've ever been made to feel like the smallest person at your own family's table, stay with me. I promise this one ends the way it should. 3 weeks before the wedding, a cream envelope arrived at my house. Addressed to Dr. Adrian Whitmore and Mrs. Margot Whitmore in calligraphy that probably cost more than my first month's rent. I opened it, half distracted. Still thinking about payroll. Then I read the names. The Marsh family requests the honor of your presence at the marriage of their son, Dr. Julian Marsh. To Isabel Calloway, my sister. I stood in my kitchen and read her name 4 times. Like the letters might rearrange into someone else. My husband read it over my shoulder and set his coffee down carefully. "You don't have to go," he said. "I know." I told him. That's not the same as not wanting to. He's a trauma surgeon. He understands the difference between a wound that needs stitches and one that just needs air. We made rules at the kitchen table like it was a business meeting. Attend the ceremony. Sit near the back. Congratulate the groom. Leave before anyone noticed the temperature drop. I chose a plain navy dress. Quiet as wallpaper. I thought I was walking in as a polite stranger. The estate sat on a hill lined with hedges and string lights. A quartet warming up under a white arch. My husband got pulled into a circle of physicians near the bar, which suited me fine. I drifted toward the terrace. And that's when I heard my mother's voice for the first time in 8 years. Bright and polished. 2 families of doctors. "Can you imagine the grandchildren?" she said to someone. And then, "Isabel has always been remarkable. Our daughter. Our only child. You understand, we poured everything into her. Our only child." I stood very still behind a stone column. I had prepared myself to be the estranged sister. The awkward footnote. I had not prepared to be erased completely. I looked down and realized the champagne in my glass was trembling. And I made my hand stop. Because I learned a long time ago that in front of these people, you never let them see you shake. To explain what happened next, I have to take you back to the hallway I grew up in. On one wall of my parents' house hang 11 frames my grandfather's medical degree, my mother's cardiology certification, my father's anesthesiology fellowship, a full lineage of achievement in glass and dark wood. We called it the wall. Sunday dinners had a ritual. My mother would ask each of us what we had accomplished that week, and the answers were graded like exam results. My sister, 3 years older, always had numbers ready. I was the other kind of child. I could set a splint on an injured bird and rebandage my grandmother's ankle better than the visiting nurse. But I froze during academic competitions. My mother never screamed about it. She simply adjusted her attention downward. The way you'd rebalance a portfolio. The summer I turned 14. A 12th frame appeared on the wall, beneath my sister's honor society certificate. It was empty. When I asked what it was for, my mother smiled like a loan officer and said, "That one's yours. Pending, 10 years ago." The week I graduated high school. My mother booked the private room at our local country club. 20 relatives. White tablecloths. A printed menu. Between the salad and the entree, she stood, tapped her glass, and announced that my sister had been accepted into medical school on a full scholarship. The whole room rose like it had been rehearsed. For a few minutes, while everyone faced the other end of the table, I ate dessert alone at my own graduation dinner. Then my mother tapped her glass again. And of course, she said, warm as a scalpel, we should say something about Margot. Every face turned. One daughter got the medical mind. She told the room, tilting her glass toward my sister. The other got, well, she let the pause finish the sentence. A few people laughed the quiet, hollow laugh people give a boss's joke. I sat there with cake on my fork and 18 years of training in my spine. And I gave that room absolutely nothing. No tears. No scene. I finished the cake. It tasted like drywall. Ladder. When the photographer's proofs went up on the mantle, I wasn't in the group photo. Not cropped out. Composed out from the start. When I asked my mother about it, she walked me to the wall, tapped the 12th frame, and said, in this family, love is earned. This frame is waiting. What you put in it is up to you. I told her the frame could wait forever. Because I wasn't going to medical school. Then it will hang empty. She said. And everyone who visits will know why. She went to bed. I stood in that hallway until the porch door creaked. And a voice said, come sit with me. Sweetheart. My grandmother Opal was on the porch swing. 2 glasses of sweet tea already poured. Because she always knew. She had been a nurse for 40 years. Night shifts. Wound care. While her husband collected the diplomas that started that wall. Heard the toast. Did you? She said. Then she unbuckled the old steel watch from her wrist. The one she'd used to time 1,000 pulses. And fastened it onto mine. 40 years I wore that. She said. It has seen more people through the worst night of their lives than everyone at that dinner table combined. And it never once asked a single person their class rank. Nobody earns love. Honey, she told me, and patted my hand. Looking out at the dark yard like the rest of that sentence lived somewhere out there. I wouldn't hear the rest of it for a long time. 10 months later, my parents redirected my entire college fund. $95,000 saved since I was a baby. To my sister's tuition. An investment goes where the return is. My mother said from the doorway. Like she was reading a weather report. By then I had already opened my own bank account and started training as a certified nursing assistant at night. Working shifts for a home care agency. I loved it. Which my mother could never forgive. She could have survived a daughter who failed at medicine. She could not survive one who succeeded at something she considered beneath us. The ultimatum came on a Tuesday. Quit the agency. Retake the entrance exams. Or leave the house. I packed in under an hour. 2 duffel bags. My certification folder. My grandmother's watch on my wrist. At the door, my mother said, "You're choosing to be nobody." I told her I was choosing to be somebody she didn't get to grade. My first client after that was a retired machinist named Walter, 86 years old, who could no longer manage his own shirt buttons. I learned to shave a face that flinched, to time medications by my grandmother's watch, to listen to the same story every night like it was brand new. Because for him, it was. I slept above a laundromat and saved every spare dollar in a coffee can. Then, the autumn I turned 23, my grandmother had a stroke. I found out 2 days late. From a neighbor. Because no one in my family called me. By the time I reached the hospice, visiting hours were restricted to a list my mother controlled as her medical power of attorney. And I wasn't on it. 11 days later, my grandmother died. I learned about the funeral after it had already happened. A week before her stroke, she'd left me a voicemail. 40 seconds long. I played the first 12 the night I learned she was gone. Then hit stop, because I wasn't ready to hear her in the past tense. I kept that voicemail 5 years and never let it finish. 6 months after we lost her, I took $15,000 from that coffee can and started my own home care company. I named it Harbor Light, because I wanted a name that sounded like the opposite of a hallway full of frames. My hiring policy was one sentence: hire the ones who show up. 5 years later, Harbor Light had caregivers across 3 states, and I had a title I still can't say without hearing my younger self laugh. Founder and president. One ordinary Tuesday. A hospital called about a patient nobody else would take, and the surgeon on the line had a voice I'd end up hearing every morning for the rest of my life. Dr. Adrian Whitmore, 34, the hospital's senior trauma surgeon, argued with me for 20 minutes about a discharge plan, and I won twice. He noticed my grandmother's watch and asked whose it had been. Nobody had asked me that in 8 years. We married 2 years later in his mother's backyard. 30 guests. A barbecue. And a fiddle. 2 weeks before the wedding, I mailed an invitation to my parents out of some old, foolish hope. It came back 13 days later. Opened, read, and resealed in my mother's handwriting. On the back, in blue ink, "Don't embarrass yourself." I kept that envelope. I never stopped sending Christmas cards either. Plain ones. Unanswered. Every year. Because some part of me was still standing at the bottom of that wall, holding my whole life up toward an empty frame, waiting for someone to hang it. 2 years ago, the hospital asked Harbor Light to sponsor a new geriatric medicine fellowship. I had one condition. It would be named the Opal Fenwick Fellowship, after my grandmother, and my own name would appear nowhere. My husband signed the paperwork with me anyway, listed only as a physician liaison. The first fellow chosen, from over 40 applicants, was a young internist named Julian Marsh. I funded a stranger's career and told no one. This spring, that stranger sent me a wedding invitation, because he was marrying my sister. The ceremony was lovely, in the way hotel lobbies are lovely. I sat in the back row with my husband's hand over mine. During the reception, my professional instincts, trained to notice what's missing from a care plan, started itemizing small inconsistencies. My sister was supposedly a dermatologist about to open her own practice, yet not one guest on her side was introduced as a colleague. Whenever anyone asked her a direct medical question, my mother materialized and answered for her. Charmingly. Every time. Then we found our table. Table 2. Groom's side. Honored guests. My mother read the seating chart and, for exactly half a second, lost control of her own face. She had no idea who Adrian Whitmore was. For 8 years she hadn't wondered about me once. And now the answer was seated close enough to share a breadbasket with the head table. My sister found me by the coat check, gripping my wrist like a blood pressure cuff. "Whatever you told them," she hissed, "you're going to walk it back." I told her the truth, that I'd only said we grew up in the same town. She said, "There is no story, Margot. As far as they know, I'm an only child." I noticed her hands were shaking. Not with nerves, but the way hands shake when one lie is standing on top of a much bigger one. The toasts began. My mother rose first, in silver, and delivered a version of the family's favorite line. "Everything in this family is earned. Nothing is given away free at our table." 200 people raised their glasses to it, and I finally heard the sentence underneath the sentence. She wasn't just saying it to us. She was still reciting it, from a father with a ledger where his affection should have been. Then Julian stood, set down his notes, and thanked, off script, the two people who made him the doctor he was. My husband, his mentor, and then a fellowship, he said, named for a nurse who worked 40 years of night shifts, funded by a founder who wouldn't let the hospital print her name. Margot Whitmore. Would you stand? Her grandmother was Opal Fenwick. Every head at that wedding turned. My mother's glass stopped an inch from her lips. My sister blurted, loud enough to reach the microphone, "You were not invited." And Julian turned to her slowly and said, "I invited her. This is the woman who paid for my fellowship. How dare either of you?" His own mother, a chief of medicine in blue silk, rose without hurry, looked at my sister, and said the sentence that finished the whole evening. "You told us you were an only child." Nobody answered her. That was the answer. My mother crossed the room and took my arm with both hands, calling me darling in front of the first 3 rows, offering me quietly everything I had wanted at 19. Come home. Sunday dinners. The frame finally gets filled, she said, her voice catching on the word frame. Actually catching. For the first time in my whole life, I looked at her trembling hands and understood, for one strange breath, that she had learned this from someone too. My father made me recite my class rank at that same table until I left for college. She told me, "I gave you a family that keeps score because it's the only kind I was ever given." I thought about my grandmother on that porch swing. Nobody earns love. Honey, no. I told my mother. The frame stays empty. I built my own wall. We walked out through the front doors, past 200 people who would spend the next 6 weeks discovering that my sister's dermatology practice had no lease, no license, and no grand opening, and that her residency had ended 2 years earlier without anyone in the family mentioning it. Julian filed for an annulment quietly, kindly, and kept the fellowship's name on his email signature. My mother resigned from every committee she used to chair, citing family matters, a sentence doing far more work than it should. My father sent me one email that fall. "Your grandmother would have been proud." I read it more times than I'll admit. I never answered it. Both of those things are true, and I've stopped needing them to fight each other. That night, on the terrace, with the party glowing gold behind the glass, I finally played my grandmother's voicemail all the way through. "Nobody earns love. Honey," she said. "Love is the thing they can't put a price on. Whatever they do with that silly wall, you were never the empty frame. Margot, you were the whole wall. And the house it holds up." 6 months later, on an ordinary Sunday, I looked down my own dinner table the way my grandmother used to count a pulse. Unhurried and grateful. My husband on one end. My first caregivers who believed in Harbor Light before it could pay them properly. And Julian. Still a Fenwick Fellow. Still, somehow family. On my own dining room wall, there are frames too. A fishing trip. A backyard wedding. A photograph of a nurse in a cardigan on a porch swing. Mid-sentence, saying something the camera couldn't quite keep. Not one certificate among them. If a family ever made you audition for your place at their own table, hear this. Love that has to be earned was never love. It was a job with no wages. And you are allowed to quit a job. The table you build afterward will hold every person your old chairs never fit. If this story meant something to you, tell me in the comments what your own empty frame looked like. I read every single one.